She sat quietly in seat 17A, the kind of seat no one really notices. Most passengers were still settling in, adjusting bags, checking their phones, talking to loved ones. But she stayed silent, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze steady on the window. To everyone around her, she looked like a normal woman, someone who probably worked long shifts serving customers and saving every small amount she earned. Her simple clothes, her modest bag, and the calmness on her face made people assume she was just a hard-working waitress traveling alone. No one would ever imagine she was anything more than that. The flight attendants greeted passengers with warm smiles, and she responded with a polite nod each time. She did not draw attention, and she did not try to start a conversation with anyone. There was something peaceful about her silence, something that made her look like she carried stories she had chosen never to share. A young couple sitting nearby whispered that she seemed too quiet, like someone escaping from a long, tiring day. A businessman behind her glanced once and thought she probably worked in a small cafe somewhere. No one saw anything unusual about her. No one could guess the truth. Outside, the aircraft began moving toward the runway, engines humming with a familiar calm power. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to a sound only she understood. Her breathing stayed steady. Her hands relaxed. Each second, she seemed more comfortable, like flying felt natural to her, even more natural than walking on the ground. The plane lifted off gently, climbing toward the clear sky. Most passengers pressed their heads back, feeling the usual rise. Some children giggled, some adults tightened their seatbelts, but she remained perfectly composed. Something in her posture hinted that turbulence, altitude, and speed never bothered her. It was the calm of someone who had spent many hours above. The clouds, the cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft reached cruising altitude. People settled in reading, sleeping, watching movies, talking softly. She continued to look out the window, watching the wide-open sky with an expression that looked almost familiar to it, as if she belonged there. Several rows ahead, a small boy dropped his toy airplane. She bent, picked it up, and handed it back with a soft smile. The boy thanked her but quickly lost interest. He had no idea the woman returning his toy had once flown something far louder, far faster, and far more dangerous than any plane on which he had ever traveled. Up in the cockpit, things were normal. The pilots chatted about weather, destination, time, and smooth air. Nothing unusual. But hundreds of miles away, high above the clouds, a pair of F-22 jets were finishing a training exercise. Their radio channels were busy with routine messages, clear commands, short replies, nothing dramatic. Until one message cut through the static, sharp and unexpected. Identify the passenger on commercial flight heading northbound, possible. Match with call sign, Falcon. The pilots of the F-22s froze for half a second. Falcon. The name was not common. It belonged to someone they all respected, someone whose records, achievements, and bravery were still spoken about with pride. Falcon was not a regular pilot. Falcon was a legend in certain circles. A person known for calm under pressure, for saving lives, for doing what others thought impossible. But Falcon had vanished from the world of aviation years ago, choosing a quiet life away from the noise of engines and sky. The F-22 pilots exchanged a quick look inside their helmets. Could it really be Falcon on a commercial flight? And traveling like an ordinary passenger? They requested a verification through air control, but information was limited. All they received was the seat number, 17A. Back inside the plane, she shifted slightly, unaware that her presence was now a topic of surprise in a military communication line. She had not flown in years, not since she walked away from a past full of uniforms, codes, and call signs. She wanted peace. She wanted normal life. And being a waitress gave her that simple peace she had longed for. No authority, no pressure, no noise. Just normal people, normal days. But peace has a strange way of finding storms. A soft chime echoed through the cabin as the captain announced a slight change en route. It sounded normal to the passengers, but she looked up instantly, a small spark of awareness in her eyes. She sensed something she had not felt in a long time. The sky outside seemed different now, quieter yet heavier, like it was holding a secret dot far above them. The F-22s matched speed with the commercial plane, approaching on either side, trying to confirm what they were told. They scanned through advanced cameras, zooming into the cabin. One pilot whispered to himself, almost in disbelief, "Seat 17A, is that really Falcon?" Below them, she felt the same quiet pressure she once felt in the cockpit of a fighter jet. She exhaled slowly. Her past was catching up, and the sky was calling her again. The soft chime of the captain's announcement faded, but something in the air felt different. Most passengers did not notice anything unusual. They simply continued, reading magazines, sipping drinks, or scrolling through their phones. But the woman in seat 17A felt the shift immediately. It was a feeling she knew too well, the quiet tension that appears right before something unexpected happens in the sky. She leaned back slowly, her eyes drifting again to the window, scanning the horizon the way a trained professional would, not the way a normal passenger would. A moment later, the faint silhouette of something fast flashed in the distance. No one else saw it. Passengers were deep in their own worlds, and the crew was busy preparing refreshments. But she noticed. Her breath paused for 1 second. She blinked once, calmly, as if confirming what she knew deep inside. They were not alone in the sky. High above the clouds, one F-22 pilot steadied his aircraft and aligned with the commercial plane's left side. His partner mirrored the motion on the right side. From the cockpit of the jet, their advanced camera zoomed into the cabin's row of seats. The pilot adjusted the zoom until he reached row 17. For a moment, he hesitated. The woman looked older than he expected. Her expression was peaceful, almost gentle. She did not resemble the intense pilot they remembered from old mission recordings. But then again, legends age too. And faces changed when they leave the sky. Confirm visual on 17A, the pilot said quietly. She matches the description, but I need further confirmation. Inside the commercial plane, the woman blinked again, a soft, thoughtful blink, as if something deep inside was waking up. She did not panic. She did not tense up. Instead, her eyes softened with a strange sadness, like someone who had tried hard to escape a past that refused to let her go. A flight attendant walked past her row, smiling as she offered water. The woman in 17A returned the smile gently. The attendant noticed nothing unusual. She simply saw a polite passenger, calm and humble. Someone who might work in a small restaurant and had taken a rare day off to travel. But a child 3 rows ahead kept turning around to look at her. He stared quietly, curious for no reason. He could understand. Children often sense things adults cannot. He tugged his mother's sleeve, whispering that the woman looked like someone brave. His mother laughed softly, not taking him seriously. Far above them, the military jets kept their silent formation. The air traffic controllers on the ground were now whispering to one another through secure lines, unsure how to proceed. Falcon had been a respected call sign, respected enough that even after disappearing, it still held weight. A pilot who saved lives during emergencies. A pilot who made impossible landings. A pilot who vanished without explanation and refused all offers to return. No one knew why she left. Some said she was tired. Some said she wanted normal life. Some said she suffered a loss no one could understand. But no one ever imagined finding her again, sitting quietly in seat 17A on a regular passenger flight. As the plane continued its steady path, a slight vibration moved through the cabin, not dangerous, but unusual. Passengers barely noticed, but the woman did. Her eyes narrowed. Slightly, not with fear, but with recognition. She lifted her hand to the armrest, almost out of habit. Like a pilot checking balance before turbulence. Her heartbeat did not speed up. If anything, she looked more alive now. The captain stepped out of the cockpit for a brief moment to speak with a flight attendant. His face carried subtle tension, the kind only trained eyes would catch. She noticed it instantly. She watched his posture, his breathing, and the way he glanced toward the windows. Something was happening, even if he did not want to alarm passengers. When the captain returned to the cockpit, she looked at the ceiling panel above her and exhaled slowly. It was the same kind of exhale she used to take before every challenging approach in her past life. Outside, one of the F-22 pilots spoke again. Ground, request final verification. If that is Falcon, we must maintain visual. Confirm if she poses any risk. The controller hesitated before answering. Falcon has no history of misconduct. She disappeared voluntarily. We do not believe she is a threat. Maintain formation for identity confirmation only. Inside the cabin, the woman reached into her bag, not quickly or nervously, but gently, and pulled out a small folded cloth. She unfolded it slowly on her lap, tracing her fingers over a faded symbol stitched into one corner. It was worn out, the stitching almost invisible, but if someone looked closely, they might recognize it. A small bird with wings stretched wide, the Falcon insignia. She smiled softly at it, not with pride, but with a mix of pain and warmth, as if it reminded her of a life that lifted her high and broke her heart at the same time. She pressed her fingers lightly over the fabric, then folded it again and put it away. She whispered something under her breath. Not a prayer, not fear, just a quiet acceptance. The sky was calling her again, whether she wanted it or not. Then she looked outside the window one more time, and this time, she noticed the F-22. Her eyes widened by only a fraction so small that no one around her saw, but inside her, something awakened. Something she thought she had buried forever. The legend of Falcon was waking up. The moment she noticed the F-22 outside her window, something shifted inside her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't surprise. It was a quiet acceptance, like someone waking from a long sleep and remembering who they once were. She slowly straightened her posture, her eyes steady on the sleek jet keeping pace with the commercial flight. The passengers around her continued talking, laughing, and reading, unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding just beyond the glass. The jet pilot on the left side of the aircraft zoomed his camera again, trying to see her face clearly. He frowned inside his helmet. She looked up, he whispered to himself. She knows we're here. His co-pilot, flying on the opposite side, added, if she reacted that calmly, it has to be her. No regular passenger does that. Inside the cabin, the woman in seat 170 lowered her gaze slowly from the window. Her fingers to tap the armrest, once soft, controlled, the kind of tap a pilot would make to steady their nerves before a complicated maneuver. But she wasn't preparing to fly. Not yet. She was preparing to face a past she had worked hard to escape. A flight attendant approached her row again, this time with snacks. Would you like something to eat? She asked kindly. The woman nodded, thanking her with a soft voice. The attendant noticed a strange calmness in her eyes, an unusual steadiness for someone traveling alone. But she brushed the thought aside. After all, people reacted to flying in different ways. The child who had been watching her earlier looked back again. This time he whispered, Mama, she looks like she's thinking about something very important. His mother smiled and told him to face forward, but the boy's eyes kept drifting towards seat 17A, as if he sensed something powerful in that quiet woman. The plane continued its path through the open sky, but a faint beep from the cockpit changed everything. The captain's voice, usually steady and relaxed, tightened slightly as he spoke to his first officer. We have unexpected company, he murmured. F-22s. They want identity confirmation of a passenger. The first officer frowned. On our flight? Who would they be looking for? The message didn't explain, the captain replied. Only one thing was clear: the name they asked about, Falcon. The first officer's eyebrows rose. He turned his seat slightly, glancing back at the rows of passengers behind them, though he could see nothing from that angle. Falcon? As in, the Falcon? That's what they said. Meanwhile, the woman in seat 17 closed her eyes again and inhaled deeply. Memories she had tried to bury began to rise, memories of engines roaring, radios crackling, and split-second decisions. That meant the difference between life and loss. She remembered the day she left the sky forever. She remembered the silence that followed, the heavy guilt she carried, and the promise she made to herself to never return. But some promises are impossible to keep. Outside, one F-22 pilot made a careful move, adjusting his position to get a clearer view of her. The sky shimmered around the jet, its wings slicing smoothly through the air. "Ground visual confirmation is almost certain," he said. "Request guidance on next step." The D response came after a pause. "Maintain distance. Do not engage. We only need to confirm identity." Inside the cabin, turbulence suddenly rocked the plane, a sharp drop followed by a quick rise. Gasps filled the air as passengers gripped their armrests. Drinks spilled and a few overhead bins rattled. The woman in 17A did not look frightened, but something inside her tightened. She looked at the ceiling, sensing the aircraft's behavior the way only an experienced aviator could. The captain's voice soon reassured everyone that the turbulence was temporary, but she knew something wasn't right. The vibration she felt wasn't natural. She pressed her palm gently against the window, feeling the hum of the aircraft. Then her eyes widened slightly, noticing a faint shimmer near the engine, something unusual, something a normal passenger would never detect from inside the cabin. She didn't panic, but she leaned forward, studying the wing carefully with the same intensity she once used in the cockpit. Outside, one F-22 pilot noticed her sudden focus. He spoke quietly over the radio. "She sees it too." His partner replied, "Then it's her, no doubt now." Back inside, a man sitting beside her finally spoke. "You seem very calm," he said nervously. "Most people get scared when the plane shakes like that." She looked at him gently. "Calm helps more than fear," she said in a steady voice. "Fear makes you forget what you already know." The man blinked, confused by her answer, but her tone strangely comforted him. Another jolt hit the aircraft, sharper this time. Lights flickered for a second. The captain's voice returned, a bit tighter now. The passengers tensed again, whispering anxiously. The woman in 17 gripped the armrest not out of fear, but out of calculation. She knew something was developing, something that might not stay small for long. She took a slow breath. If the situation worsened, she knew she would have to step forward, even though she promised herself she never would again. Outside, the F-22s kept close watch, unaware yet that the legendary Falcon was seconds away from making a choice that would change everything. Another tremor shook the aircraft, stronger than before. Passengers gasped louder this time, and even the flight attendants paused in the aisle with worried expressions. The plane dipped, not dangerously yet, but enough to make everyone feel the sudden drop in their stomachs. Some people held tightly to their loved ones. Others shut their eyes and whispered prayers. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from comfort to quiet fear, but the woman in seat 17A stayed completely steady. Her calmness looked almost out of place in the growing tension. She observed everything: how the wings moved, how the engine sounded, how the lights flickered for a second longer than normal. She wasn't panicking, she was analyzing. It was the look of someone who had seen technical failures before, Someone who had solved them, thousands of feet above the ground. Another vibration pulsed through the plane, this one accompanied by a faint metallic sound. Passengers looked around confused. The woman in 17A knew exactly what that sound meant. Something was shifting on the left side of the aircraft, near a critical point she had learned to monitor long ago. She leaned closer to the window, narrowing her eyes. Outside, the F-22 pilot noticed her movement. "She's watching the wing," he said into his radio. "She's not afraid. She's evaluating the situation." His partner responded. Only Falcon would stay that calm. Inside the cockpit, the captain and first officer were no longer hiding their concern. Warning lights flashed softly on the control panels. The captain took a slow breath, keeping his voice steady even though the tension in his shoulders had grown. "Air traffic control, we've got unusual engine feedback. No loss yet, but we're monitoring closely," he said. Air control replied. "We see the F-22s have visual. They're reporting abnormal motion near the left wing. Keep us updated." The first officer turned toward the captain, eyes widening. "They noticed it too?" "They wouldn't be flying this close if they didn't," the captain answered. Back in the cabin, a flight attendant approached the woman in 17A, trying to stay calm. "Is everything okay here? If you need anything, please let me know," she said, her voice trembling a little. The woman looked up at her gently. "You're doing very well," she said in a soothing tone. "Just keep people calm. That's the most important thing right now." The attendant nodded, though she did not know why those words brought her so much comfort. Something about the woman's eyes, her voice, her steady breathing, it all felt strangely reassuring. A second later, the plane jolted again. This time, a few passengers screamed softly. The cabin lights flickered twice before stabilizing. The woman in 17 closed her eyes but did not flinch. She could feel it. Something serious was developing. The boy who had been observing her earlier turned around once more. His eyes were wide, but he whispered, "You're not scared." She looked at him kindly. Sometimes staying calm helps everyone else feel safe. He nodded slowly, even though he did not fully understand. Another sharp metallic noise echoed. The woman in 17A looked back at the wing and adjusted her breathing. She could tell what was happening, even from inside the cabin. The left engine was struggling under a pressure imbalance. It wasn't failing yet, but if the situation continued, the aircraft might face a chain reaction of issues, one wrong shift, and the problem would escalate. Outside, one F-22 pilot noticed the same thing on his screen. "Ground, we're seeing irregular heat signatures near the left engine," he reported. "It matches early signs of pressure issues. Can you confirm if this is related to Falcon's presence?" The controller asked. "No," the pilot replied firmly. "This has nothing to do with her. This is a technical issue." His voice softened as he added, "But if that really is Falcon, her experience could save lives if things get worse." In the cabin, panic began to spread. A woman across the aisle started crying quietly. A man whispered anxiously toward his spouse, asking what was happening. The tension grew thicker, spreading from row to row like a silent wave. Even passengers trying to remain strong felt the fear rising. The woman in 17A took another breath and finally unbuckled her seatbelt, not in panic, but with calm purpose. Her movement caught the attention of the man sitting beside her. "Ah, you going somewhere?" he asked nervously. "Not yet," she said softly. "But I may need to." "Need to? Why?" he asked. Before she could answer, the captain's voice came over the speaker. His tone was steady, but anyone who listened closely could hear the strain beneath it. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some minor technical issues. Our crew is working on it, and we have support nearby in the sky. Please remain seated and stay calm." The passengers exchanged confused glances. Support in the sky? They didn't know what that meant. But the woman in 17A understood perfectly. She lifted her eyes to the ceiling and listened to the hum of the engines again. She knew the captain wasn't telling them everything, and he was doing that to avoid panic. But she also knew the issue was reaching a point where someone would have to act decisively. She closed her eyes for a moment. She did not want to return to this life. She did not want to be Falcon again. But the sky was no longer asking her, it was demanding her. And she knew that if things got even a little worse, she would have no choice but to stand, walk to the cockpit, and reveal who she really was. The cabin had fallen into a thick, uneasy silence. Even the passengers who were trying to stay brave were now gripping their seats a little tighter. The plane vibrated again, not violently, but in a way that made everyone feel something was happening beneath them, something they could not see, something they could not control. A nervous whisper spread through the rows like a soft ripple, but the woman in seat 17A still sat with her spine straight and her breathing slow, observing every detail the way only someone with deep experience could. She watched the wing more carefully now, noticing the slight irregular rhythm in the engine's movement. The sound had changed. The pressure had changed. She knew it. The problem was no longer small. She reached down quietly, tightening her shoes. A simple motion, but one that meant she was preparing herself. The man beside her watched her with worried curiosity. "Are you sure everything is okay?" he asked. Her eyes remained on the window. "Not everything," she answered gently. "But there's still time." He did not know what she meant, but something in her voice felt safe, even when her words did not explain anything. A moment later, the captain made another announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're working closely with air control. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened." His voice wavered just a little. To most passengers, it sounded like normal stress, but to her, it sounded like a signal. She could hear the pressure beneath his words, the tension of someone who was trying to hide fear from the people relying on him. She understood that kind of pressure better than anyone. As she listened, she felt old instincts returning, instincts she had pushed far away. Her mind began calculating the aircraft's weight, angle, and altitude without even meaning to. She watched the clouds drifting by and mentally measured their speed. She had thought she buried this part of herself, but it was rising now, stronger than before. Meanwhile, outside, the two F-22s kept close watch. One pilot spoke again, his voice firm. "Ground left engine vibration confirmed. If this continues, the plane may need assistance." His co-pilot added, "Falcon hasn't moved yet, but she definitely knows. You can see it on her face." Back inside the commercial plane, a flight attendant approached the woman cautiously. "Ma'am, would you like some water?" "I noticed you haven't said much." The woman smiled kindly. "I'm all right. You take care of everyone else." The attendant felt a strange comfort in her tone, as if the woman wasn't just a passenger, but someone who understood the stress of responsibility. She nodded and moved on, trying to calm other travelers. The plane shook again, this time harder. A few people cried out. The overhead bins rattled. A soft beep echoed through the cabin from above, a sound most passengers did not recognize, but she did. That beep wasn't normal. It was a systems alert. The boy who kept watching her now turned completely around in his seat, fear in his eyes. "Is the plane going to fall?" he whispered. She leaned slightly toward him, giving him the warmest smile she could. "Planes are strong, and there are very good people making sure we stay safe. But you don't look scared," he said. She hesitated for a moment, then answered with a truth she rarely shared. "Because fear doesn't help in the sky. Calm does." The boy nodded slowly, feeling a little braver. Another sharp jolt hit the aircraft, and this time even she felt the urgency of it. She finally unbuckled her seatbelt all the way and stood up slowly. Not a single movement was rushed. She moved. With steady purpose, like someone who knew exactly what she needed to do, a flight attendant hurried toward her. "Ma'am, please remain seated," she said nervously. "We need everyone to stay buckled." The woman met her eyes with a calm that almost froze the attendant in place. "I need to speak to the captain," she said softly. The attendant blinked. The captain?" "Yes," she replied, her voice firm but gentle. "Please take me to the cockpit. It's important." The attendant hesitated. Protocol said no. Training said no. Every rule said no. But instinct, some deep human instinct, told her that this woman knew more than she was admitting. Something in her posture, her voice, and her presence didn't feel like a normal passenger asking out of fear. She felt more like someone returning to a place she once belonged. "Let me check," the attendant whispered anxiously before hurrying toward the cockpit. Passengers watched with confusion, whispering among themselves about why someone from row 17 would need to see the captain during turbulence. The boy smiled faintly, as if he understood more than the adults around him. "She's going to help," he whispered to himself. In the cockpit, the attendant knocked quickly. The captain opened the door halfway, his face tight from stress. "Is everything all right out there?" he asked. "Sir, there's a woman asking to speak with you." "Seat 17A. She said it's important." The captain frowned deeply. 17A? "Did she say why?" "No, sir. But she doesn't look scared at all. She looks like someone who knows what this is." The captain paused. Then he said the words that would change everything. "Bring her in." The attendant rushed back and gestured for the woman in 17A to follow her. As she walked down the aisle, passengers stared in silence. Some scared, some curious, some simply shocked that someone was being taken into the cockpit. She did not look back. She only looked forward, toward the place she promised she would never return to. But fate was opening the door again, and she stepped toward it like someone who knew the sky was waiting for her. As she reached the front of the cabin, everything felt strangely quiet. The passengers stared after her, sensing something unusual, but not understanding what it meant. The flight attendant stepped aside respectfully, unsure why they felt compelled to do so. The woman's steps were calm, steady, almost too steady for someone walking toward a cockpit in the middle of an unfolding emergency. The captain opened the door wider as she approached. He studied her face carefully, as if searching for any sign of fear or confusion. But all he saw was a calm strength, the kind he had only seen in people who had spent years in high-pressure situations. "Come in," he said softly. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her. The cockpit was filled with blinking lights, quiet alarms, and the steady hum of stressed engines. The first officer looked over his shoulder, surprised to see a passenger standing there. The captain turned to her. "You asked to speak with me. Do you know something about what's happening?" She nodded once. "The vibration you're feeling isn't random. It's the left engine adjusting for internal pressure changes." Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. "It's trying to balance itself, but it won't hold for long." The first officer blinked in disbelief. "How do you know that just from sitting in the cabin?" She hesitated for a moment, then responded quietly, "Because I've heard it before." Her words made the captain study her even more closely. "Who are you?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer to the control panel, listening to the engines through the faint audio feed. The sound confirmed what she already suspected. She whispered, almost to herself, "It's worse than it sounds." The first officer stood, uneasy. "Ma'am, only trained pilots can." The captain lifted his hand. "Let her speak." Another soft tremor shook the plane. The captain quickly stabilized the aircraft, but his breathing grew heavier. He turned back to her. "Are you a pilot?" She took a slow breath. "I used to be. Civilian?" The first officer asked. "Military," she replied, her eyes lowering slightly. A long time ago. The captain exchanged a quick look with his first officer. The air control message came back to him. Someone with the call sign Falcon might be on board. He felt his pulse tighten. Do you know the name Falcon? He asked carefully. Silence filled the cockpit. The woman did not flinch. She did not look proud or ashamed. She simply looked tired. That was a long time ago, she said softly. The captain felt the realization hit him like a wave. The first officer froze completely. They had heard stories, whispers among pilots, old records stored in forgotten files. Falcon was not just a pilot. Falcon was someone who had performed landings no one thought possible, someone who saved crews in impossible weather, someone who flew into storms others turned away from, someone who disappeared without explanation. And now she was standing in their cockpit. Before they could ask anything else, the plane jolted violently. Warning lights glowed brighter. The captain grabbed the controls. We're losing balance again. The woman stepped forward instinctively. Your left stabilizer is overcorrecting, she said. You need to ease the pressure manually, or you'll force the engine into shutdown. The first officer stared. How do you know that without instruments? She answered quietly, because I've lived through it. Another jolt rocked the aircraft, sharper this time, forcing all three of them to grab onto something. The cockpit filled with soft alarms, and the captain's voice tightened with urgency. Air control. We may need emergency support, he said into the radio. We're fighting stability issues. Outside, the F-22 pilots heard the distress call and drew closer. One of them spoke. Captain, is Falcon with you? The cockpit fell silent again. The captain looked at the woman. She looked back at him, her eyes steady and honest. She didn't deny it. She didn't run from it. She simply stood there as turbulence rattled around them, as if she had walked into storms like this her entire life. The captain pressed the radio. She's here. The F-22 pilot responded instantly. We're standing by. Tell her we have visual and we'll follow her lead if needed. The captain looked at her again, this time not with confusion, but with respect. If you know what's happening, he said, we need your help. She took a slow breath, the kind of breath she used to take before handling impossible situations. She moved to the jump seat behind them and secured herself. Tell me your altitude and pressure numbers, she said calmly. The first officer read them off quickly. She nodded slowly. We still have time. But if the engine continues compensating like this, we may face a forced descent. The captain swallowed hard. Can we stop it? Yes, she answered. But only if we work together. She leaned forward, her hands hovering near the controls, not touching yet, not assuming authority, but offering guidance. It was the moment she never wanted to face again. The moment she became Falcon. The cockpit felt smaller now, filled with tension, blinking warnings, and the weight of a decision that could change every life on board. The woman in the jump seat, once Falcon, closed her eyes for a brief moment. She wasn't remembering old glory. She wasn't reliving medals or missions. She was remembering why she left. She had walked away because she wanted silence, peace, a life without pressure or danger, a life where she was just a waitress, not a legend. But the sky had a way of calling back those who understood it deeply. The captain repeated the altitude numbers. The first officer fought the controls as the aircraft shook again, this time with heavier force. The alarms grew louder, not urgent enough to demand evacuation, but sharp enough to show that the window for safe correction was closing. She opened her eyes and spoke quietly. Captain, I can stabilize it if you trust me. He did not hesitate. What do you need? Her voice remained calm, steady, almost gentle. Ease the pressure by 2 degrees on the left stabilizer. Not more, not less. The first officer did as she said. Instantly, the shaking reduced only slightly, but enough. for everyone in the cockpit to feel the difference. She leaned forward, analyzing the engine's rhythm through the audio, through subtle vibrations, through instincts she thought she had buried. Now adjust the trim, she continued. The captain followed her instructions carefully. Outside, the F-22 pilots watched the commercial aircraft attempt correction. One of them whispered into his radio, "That's Falcon." Only she would know to do that manually. Inside the plane, the cabin grew quieter as the shaking slowed. Passengers still looked terrified, but the worst of the turbulence had softened. A flight attendant whispered a silent thank you under her breath without knowing why. But the problem wasn't gone. The plane dipped again, lower this time, as if testing its own limits. The captain steadied it, but his breathing grew heavier. "It's still pushing against us," he said. She nodded. She already knew. "We'll need to guide the aircraft into a controlled descent before the engine decides for us." The captain looked at her. "Can we?" "With teamwork," she replied softly. "And with calm." The first officer looked at her, his voice trembling. "You haven't flown in years." "What if," she interrupted gently, "flying is something you don't forget, not when it becomes part of your breathing." Another warning light blinked. It was now or never. She placed her hands near the controls, still not touching until she received the captain's approval. He nodded slowly. "You have the lead," he said. She exhaled long, controlled, steady. Her hands finally touched the controls. The change was immediate. She didn't fight the aircraft. She guided it, easing its panic, smoothing its struggle the way someone calms a frightened child. She could feel its weight, its fear, its resistance. She whispered under her breath, not words of fear, but words of encouragement, something she used to do during missions, when machines were as human to her as the people she saved. The captain and first officer followed her movements closely. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't forcing anything. She was balancing, listening, guiding. "Reduce speed slightly," she said. They obeyed. "Level the pitch." They obeyed again. The aircraft steadied, slowly, carefully, almost gracefully. Outside, the F-22 pilots watched with awe. "Falcon brought it back," one said quietly. "Just like the old stories." The commercial plane dipped lower, but under control, now no longer falling, but gliding toward safety. Passengers held hands, some cried softly, others prayed. And through it all, the woman from seat 17A kept guiding the aircraft with a calmness that held everyone together. Finally, after several long minutes, the engine stabilized. The shaking stopped. The alarms silenced. The captain exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for an hour. "We're stabilized." She leaned back slowly, releasing the controls. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of a part of her returning. The captain looked at her with deep respect. "You saved us." She shook her head softly. "We saved each other." The radio crackled. One F-22 pilot spoke, his voice filled with emotion even through static. "Falcon, if you can hear this, it's an honor." She stared at the radio for a moment, then looked away, her eyes heavy with memories. She did not reply. The captain lowered the aircraft toward the nearest safe airport. The landing was smooth, one of the smoothest in his career. As the wheels touched the runway, the passengers burst into relieved applause. They thought the captain had done it all. They didn't know about the quiet woman who had guided them through the sky to safety. When the plane stopped fully, the captain turned to her. "If you ever want to return to the sky, you'd be welcomed anywhere." She smiled softly. "Thank you. But I think I'll go back to my life, the simple one." He nodded with understanding. She stood, opened the cockpit door, and walked back into the cabin. Passengers watched her with gratitude they couldn't explain. The little boy waved shyly. She smiled at him. Then she returned to seat 17A, just a waitress again, but in the sky, in the world of pilots. The legend of Falcon had quietly risen once more.